You want to help me do an intro? In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to paint and even draw these lilacs right here. Kind of an impressionistic style, but very colorful. We're only going to be using 3 different colors to paint this, and I'll show you how that makes blue. But the secret tip to this, for making this easy shapes, are cotton swabs. That's going to be our special tool this time for making these lilacs. So join me along and I'll show you how to make this. So the materials we're going to be using for making the lilacs today are 3 main colors plus white paint that you see in here. I have a giant container of white, so I just scoop it out. We've got Dioxazine Purple, Phthalo Green, and then this Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue, which is a warm sort of bright yellow. And we're going to be mixing all the lilacs colors we need from this. And you'll see why I chose these particular colors, partially so that we save time mixing. That's the biggest one, because I know you can make basically all the colors from red, blue, and yellow paint, but we want to tweak some colors around and not spend all of our time mixing them. And we're also using some cotton swabs, or Q-tips as we often call them, cotton swabs to do lots of little dabbing bits with our lilacs. So there is a little bit of color mixing to go with this one. We're going to start with the background of this first. I'm going to be using this painting knife to mix my paints on my paper plate here. It's a wax-coated paper plate. That actually helps because then the acrylic paints won't dry out as quickly and soak into the paint. Use what you've got. So when you're mixing paint on this big globs, scoop some out. I've heard this pile called the mothership. You want to leave a clean pile there. You scoop some out to mix somewhere else. And surprisingly, and that's okay, I didn't know so many of my students would just add things to that pile. And it's something you learn as you go along. So for this background, we're going to be going from light to dark down here. And we're going to need a big pile, kind of green and kind of blue. And so you're going to see something a little surprising with these 2 colors that I have. We've got the Phthalocyanine green, like phthalo blue, but it's the green version. And this is Dioxazine Purple. A little bit of dry bits here and there. And I'll add those like that. These are my favorite colors to work for lavender and lilacs and lots of purple things. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is show you why I picked these very specific colors right now. The name does matter. I'm just going to mix these 2 together. We'll use this for the dark part of our background anyway. A little bit of that purple, which as you know, purple is red and blue mixed together. But this purple is so blue by itself that when you get these greens and purples together right here, we're actually going to get a decent blue out of mixing these 2 together. It's almost like the yellow and the red in there cancel themselves out, like the red and the purple and the yellow and the green. I don't know how it works exactly with these 2 particular little pigments, but you're seeing we're getting a wonderful teal blue out of this. And if you add a little bit more purple, you might even get more of an ultramarine blue background with that, but that's going to be probably our darkest dark that we're working with on this painting. And as you can see, it's a really blue tone. So that's why I picked these 2 colors specifically, because of so much you can do with that. We'll probably be mixing a lot more of this together as we go along. This is a lot of back and forth when you do it on your own time, and that's perfectly fine. That's kind of even the point, actually, of here's a springboard for you to try it yourself. So I'm going to take some of this dark, I want some more green actually, more of that green-blue, and mix it over here, a little satellite pile. And that's the point of these as well. So I've scraped out of these little piles, so I've got clean paint I can scrape from, or with your brush, to mix around. And so we've got this central paint, this one paint we can do and then mix other little colors around it. So instead of spending our time mixing this one color, we can play around with different variations of it instead. So that's one reason why I use a canned color. Alright, so this pile of white right here, we're going to mix it all up. This is kind of like playing with hot sauce. You don't normally add like tomato chunks to the jalapenos, you add the jalapenos to the tomato chunks. Or else you're going to be adding more and more and more paint to the point where you used up all your white, So dark typically goes into the light little bits at a time. I like it. And that's a nice pale blue that we've got going on right there. It is to me anyway, whether my camera can pick it up or not. We've got lots of different lights going on right there. And it doesn't matter what color blue you get, it's the way you like it, and that's the whole point. Now, typically I would use this palette knife to spread paint all over here, but I would rather be doing what you are doing, just so it's time's sake, and also I can describe what's happening with the brush as we go along. So, make sure my palettes and everything is in the camera, because I realize I tend to pull things closer and closer to the edge of the table to be near me, and then you can't see anything. So I'm going to be using this brush. It's called a filbert brush, which is named after the hazelnut, and you can kind of see that little scoop that a hazelnut has on the side of it, or even like the shape of your thumb, called a cat's paw. I'm using this one because I grabbed it and I've done lots of classes with this particular one. You don't have to have a filbert. You can use a flat. Something that covers a lot is good. Flats are also good. Filberts, one reason why they're so versatile with classes and just practical things. This way, it's very flat. You've got a rounded edge that you can do all sorts of things with, but if you turn this little guy on the side, you know how a round brush right there, you see how narrow that is. And so you have a lot of versatility with that. Now, I do have other rounds about that size. So you've got the width right there and almost another round, just like that by tilting it. So you kind of only need one brush, but for some details, you would still need a round one. However, because we're not really making lines today, we're making dabs, we'll be using these to make those little shapes, and that's farther in. Something that does help is a spray bottle. I'll be using it because I'm talking a lot more. It helps for acrylic paint, but we'll get there. So, we're going to do a light blue, green, whatever you've got. The light one goes up here, dark one goes right here. And I've decided in my head that I'm going to go top down with this. And it doesn't really matter. As long as we get, even the gradient doesn't matter, honestly. And I'm not going to be careful about it either. I'm just getting that paint on there. That's kind of the whole point. This is just that first layer. Can you hear the scraping? That dry paint is picking up the surface tension of the canvas. That's probably the completely wrong way of saying it, but we're trying to break the surface tension of that canvas right there to get some paint on. Now, another thing to help the paint go all over this is a little dab of water. And I've just dipped my paintbrush into my dirty mixing water right there and help it spread around a little bit. So we've got a nice, almost, that's a light blue, and you saw me mix that, excuse me. That was from the green and the purple right here. And I almost want it lighter up here. So see, right away, I'm breaking the rules right here. I've grabbed out of my white, trying to keep it clean, but also putting it into that blue up there. And I might even make another lighter blue. This might be too dark for me. What we're trying to do is make a lighter background for the purples to pop out of. It's going to make the purples stand out on top. And then the bottom here, we want something darker, so here we go. Darker greens. We're going to get it on there. Something darker green for the lighter lilac leaves to stand out on. So we're going to put lighter green leaves on top of this dark down here. And we're going to be putting darker purple lilacs, or at least darker than this, on top. Working those lights and darks helps direct these eyes back and forth and point out where you want to go. It's all about kind of like a psychology of where people look. And keeping this in mind as you paint can help. In fact, if you don't want your subject to be seen, or even a detail to be seen as much, you decrease the contrast around it. That's also partially what you do for perspective. Things farther away from you aren't going to have as much contrast, unless maybe you wanted to emphasize what was back there. You can play with that. There's rules, and then you break them. So we're getting all sorts of smudges all over this thing, and that's partially how this paint works and also how I'm painting. I kind of want a smooth background, but I also know that you could take forever getting a smooth background. And right now, we don't want to do that. We want to get to the fun parts where this thing is. So I want it dark right up here. That's the other thing with this. I could have started a lot darker at the bottom right here. There we go. Both of these colors are fairly transparent, which is perfectly fine. And of course we can come back in with some darker bits at the bottom as well. Whew, that's thick paint. We want it dark, but it's so transparent. That's okay. And I'm probably coming up, it's almost halfway up where we're getting darker right there. My poor little attention span has almost had enough trying to get these brush marks to go away, because I know we're going to be putting so many other things on top of it, it doesn't really matter at this point. What you can do to help blend, just wipe off your brush, not even water. One of the other things I see a lot of students, and myself included when I began, the mistake is adding so much water on your brush. You don't wring out or dry off your brush after you rinse it. And it creates a mess. It creates an absolute mess where you're not moving paint anymore, you're moving a puddle. And it just doesn't work. So it seems almost like you're wasting paint by wiping it off your brush like that. Yeah, kinda, sorta. There's ways around it. This paint's getting everywhere! Whee! Whatever. I like that texture in the background. And we might go over it again once it's dried out a little bit, but we'll get there. This is where I'm going to rinse my brush. As you can see, I've gotten some blue up in the ferrule right there. That's not good for my poor little brush, even though I've used this for student stuff a long time. You can hear my swishing. And I'm going to wipe it off again. Try to be careful to use a clean part of that paper towel right there. But I'll need more of that. Now while this dries, we're still going to go in this thing with like a pencil or even another Q-tip right here. It will dry, we'll mush it around, and you can poke with it, of course. You can pause the stinking video and keep poking and playing. Letting it dry a little bit will help. We can start with the dark up here and go that way. It being so transparent isn't helping us right here. But right now, we're going to be drawing a little bit with this. This will help remove some of the paint. We just want something to see. Now, lilacs are cone-shaped flowers. They're kind of droopy, so they're floppy little cone-shaped flowers. And that just boils down to a triangle. We're going to be drawing triangles with this little Q-tip. This isn't a pencil. This isn't a paintbrush. You're used to making lines. So we're going to start with some triangles of where we want our lilac stuff to be. Now, I like things in threes. So where these things are placed and how big they are is going to make a big difference for as we go along. Now, I really like light coming in from one of the top corners up here, one of these directions. And because I'm an English reader, having things move from left to right feels natural to me for my eyes. So I'm actually going to make a little note up here that my light is coming from this direction. You'd be surprised how much this helps. So I'm going to make a little note, and we'll probably cover that up with who knows what. Or, you know what? Let's make a note up here. It's surprising how you can kind of forget where all your light is coming from. Don't be afraid of taking notes for yourself of things that you might take for granted. It's like, why would you take a note for that? You'd be surprised. It's okay. No shame in taking notes. It's a tool. Alrighty, this stuff is starting to dry, so let's start doodling. I'm going to start with a triangle from one of the bigger lilac bunches. I'm going to start halfway right here. So here's the base of my triangle. It's a line. This is very complicated so far. One line, slightly below halfway, and I want this one to droop over just a teeny little bit, so it's going to end right about there. That's as tall as I want my lilac flower to be. Now, also with this one, you don't even have to make a straight line for this triangle. In fact, please don't. Don't have to worry about these being straight lines either, because you're making this wobbly old triangle right here. If you do make a straight line, That's okay. You're going to see what we're going to do on top of this to make that okay too. So big straight line, and what I'm doing down here is I'm curving it to remind myself that this is a three-dimensional object. It's not actually a triangle, and part of those flowers are going to come out in front of this. If you forget to curve it, or don't know how much to curve it, it's okay. Seriously, that's why we're doing this. This is a simple shapes, and florals and organics are so forgiving when you do shapes like this. So this other triangle over here, I tend to do lilacs in threes, or at least shapes of threes. I'm going to have this other one come over here. So I want the point of it to be right around there. Partially because it's not centered on anything. For our sake of our composition, you don't want it perfectly centered. We're just going to have it go over here somewhere. And then the base of the lilac, you know, I'm making them around the same because the flowers are pretty uniform. It's going to be down here. I'm partially making this up as we go along, so we'll see how these shapes work. Kind of a smudgy line. And remember, they're heavy little suckers. They get thinner the farther you go up. So they do droop a little bit, even droop more. And if you do tend to be drawing this while your paint's dry, stick in some of the dark stuff. Because we're actually going to be painting these in darker anyway fairly soon, so you can use some wet paint to draw in here. If you used your pencil, you would get paint all over this, and it would make it harder to sharpen your pencil unless you, even if you wipe it off, it will get into the wood. That's why I'm not advocating for your pencil right now. And if it's dry, your pencil won't even stick. That's why we're drawing with paint into paint. So right now these are pretty even. I almost want this one to droop over more, but we'll work into that. Now where should our third one be? I kind of want it to really droop, but I think if it overlaps this a little bit, we could have some real fun. So I'm going to have the tip of it be right around in here, not dead center. See how I just corrected myself? This was in the center of this flower. I don't want that. So this one you can go that way. I don't want it to be the dead center, so we can try there. And I'm going to have the base of my lilac somewhere over here. And a wobbly, droopy business coming along right there. So it's kind of curved. You could do a straight line and then give it a belly if you want. So a straight line, then give it a curvy belly. That's okay. And honestly, if you didn't like your lines, well look, you can smudge it. You can paint right over it. With acrylics, it's super easy to do, and it will dry in plenty of time for you to do what you need to do afterwards. So there's some 3 lilacs. I want to block in, while we're still drawing, a little bit of the leaves we want to do. And I also kind of want to bring this up a little bit to fill in some of the space up here. So a lot of this is going back and forth. And I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. Right up there. It's still a general cone shape. I'm not really that worried about that. Generalized shapes is what we're going for right there. Now if we do start smudging out here, we're probably going to have to go over it with another background layer that we may not get to this one, but at least you know how to fix it. So, lighter layers, I'm picking up some light paint right here to draw with, and we want some lilac leaves. Now these are also pointy. They're basically like hearts or other tinier triangles that will still droop. So this is a nice dark area to pop out some leaves with. These are also pointing where your eyes are going to go, which is why I like to play broken physics a little bit and have my leaves point up a tiny little bit on the outsides. So I'm going to make a smudgy leaf shape. We'll see how that goes. That points up. I don't like it. Smudge that out right there. Let's just make some generalized leaf shapes, okay? So there's the edge of the lilac. It can go into the edge. It's fine. And we know this shape is going to droop down. It's a leaf. I don't like how it's pointing out, but it's a lilac. It's a leaf. Who knows what we'll figure out with that. It's okay. Whatever. Whatever. It's easy painting. So what I did here is I just made a line down and I connected it. This is kind of a little triangle shape or a heart. It's super easy little swipes and you make them connect. I'm going to do a couple more of these to show you how I'm drawing them. And some of them will point up a little bit. So this is kind of a little curved line right here. And I'm going to Give it a friend on the other side that meets it. So it's almost like doing a little heart. If I turned this, like right here, I can do a heart. So if you're better at drawing just plain hearts, you can try it with the Q-tip. There's one side of the heart, and there's the other. And drooping that a little bit, don't let it end right at the edge. That's another composition thing. Also, if you don't want to worry about composition, if you're having fun drawing and just focusing on the drawing, don't worry about the edges either. That's little steps that you keep on adding in the more advanced you want to go. So if you're having fun, don't worry about the edges either. If you want to learn about composition, don't let things touch the edge. Don't let things touch middles. Alright, another heart. I want another heart. I'm actually going to have this leaf come up in front of the lilac a little bit and tip that down. I like that heart right there. Again, see this little edge right here? See, now my composition's kicking in. You don't want this pointing exactly at this corner because it's a composition thing. So I'm going to make sure that leaf points a little bit above it. You could say the same thing about this line, but that's where I'm like, here's the rule, and here's how I break it right here. We're just blocking some leaves in while the other parts dry. But we're really going to come back to a lot of these and poke around a little bit. So I'm just making some lines of some leaves that are coming out here and there. Some of these will be melted into the background, hopefully, so that we're not as aware and we'll have lots of greens going on. I really want a green to come over the edge of this lilac right here. So when you draw these leaves in, I'm kind of filling them in as a reminder that this is a leaf, this is not part of the lilac, and also composition. When you draw all that in, you don't have to paint the entire lilac and paint over something you've just done. You kind of want it, that saves paint for a little bit and saves lots of your time and effort as well. I do want there to be a leaf that points out right here, just like that. That'll be kind of dark. What's bugging me right here, it's like equal distance from here, but I think some lilacs are going to push that in. Equidistant things, unless it's on purpose. Again, it's all these little tiny compositional things that to me will bug me, to you, you're having fun. So I'll try to correct as I go and show you why these may not work in the future. Want something under here, but I think we're going to find that anyway. And there aren't that many leaves. You notice that? There really aren't that many that we're doing right here. There's a stem. There's another leaf that we don't have to do as much of the lilac if you have more leaves. How convenient. But, there we go. Ta-da! I forgot what I was going to say. Alrighty. That'll do it. Drawing it out first. Okay. Let everything dry in the background for a little bit. When you have some of the leaves and things drawn out, you don't need that many of them because you're suggesting that there's a lot more. We know what leaves look like. Our brains know what leaves look like. And we know that a lilac bush has tons of them. So we really only need to know about a few of them to give like, hey, yeah, this is a lilac bush, not a different kind. We only need a few to help us determine all of those things about this particular lilac bush and to know that there are going to be others behind it. We don't have to put all of them in. That's a photograph. If you want to have fun drawing all that stuff like a coloring book, go ahead. I'm not going to do that now, and we're not going to spend time doing that. Alright, there's that Q-tip. I tend to talk, so I'm going to spray that a little bit. What we're doing now is putting in some really dark cones. We've got some triangles here, and we're almost going to just fill those in with some of this darker stuff, which is already drying because it's drying here. Lots of this purple, a bit of the green. We know it's kind of transparent, but here we go. And I'm just going to get in there. I'm going to fill this whole triangle with this darker purple, maybe up to the edges. Edges around the leaves. If it gets on the leaf, like that, whatever. That's okay. I'll mess it up as I go so you know it's perfectly fine. I'm rounding the edges. I'm not going completely to those edges. I'm not really worried about really sharp lines right there either. So what we're doing here is creating a background for other purple to pop up off of. We're creating a background for some lighter purple petals. This is kind of like the dark part of the lilac that's all in shadow. It's all in shadow back there for us to see. Now, this is the tricky part, where if something overlaps like this and you just paint over it, you've lost those lines that you've made to guide you. So this can be helpful in composition to actually, because you're going to see it as a one whole shape. But what we can do instead is wipe away a little bit of where it's at so you still have some of those lines. Just little things to help you out a little bit. Get some green in there. Other purples. I'm going to help it droop a little bit, and the petals we put on there is also going to help with that. It looks like some purple gnome hats right now, and they're throwing their little beards around. Purple gnome party. Woohoo! Alright, now we can get to the fun part. Cool. Now, next for these things, there's two things we need to do, obviously. We're going to let those backgrounds dry a little bit, and we're going to mix up some nice lighter green to go over some of these parts and mess around, and then we're going to do all those little petals. Now, the reason I want to do a lot of those little petals last is that you can have way too much fun dabbing with those little petals to the point where I might show you one of these cones, and then you finish when you can or when you want to, because you can continue with that. It's so repetitive and relaxing. So I'm going to mix up some lighter green. That's partially what this yellow is for. So I've scooped some yellow over here. Now we'll go away, Q-tip. Go over here. I'm going to scoop some white out, and see, I'm messing with all that rules right there. I added darker yellow to the white, partially because I forget, dyslexic, whatever, and partially because I like to waste paint, apparently. Now we're going to take some of this darker green stuff we've got scraped on here, whatever you've got on your palette, and we're going to add those two together into some fun, juicy, bright green colors right there. Yeah, there's probably a bit of purple in there as well. I love it. We're going to make this super simple because this is a nice, fun, quick little painting we're doing. Big painting we're doing, especially for the time we're working with right here. This is pretty big for this time period. So, big old brush. I'm going right over that white part right there. And that can actually help some of your petals. I really like that broken color, so we're going to leave it. That broken color, and you can do more broken color by picking up all sorts of goop on your brush and not touching it once it's on there. You kind of do one swoosh and it's on. One swoosh and it's on. That's probably a bigger lilac leaf than what might be on a regular lilac bush. To make it blend into the background a little bit, I'm darkening that green. So I'm adding more of that green and a little bit of that purple, just like we did the background. And so you can do little splops of lilac blobby shapes to make that help blend into the background. Just like that. And I realize part of this is going back and forth like, I thought we were doing the light petals, the light leaves. Well, I was, and now I'm doing the background. Because it helps do the background first for whenever you're going over something else. This phthalo blue is wonderful for that. This is where you've got that middle ground and you're making things poke through. Alright, as I go higher up, I'm actually making some of the green a little lighter because we do want, that is a lot lighter. It looks darker up here because the background is also so much lighter on top. We want it to lose contrast the higher up we go. There we go. Losing contrast because we're going to be seeing the lilacs up there, not the flowers. So I'm really just dabbing on these shapes in the background. I can go over some of these lilac corners, just enough to give like, no, that's a leaf in front of it, you're fine. Now this little guy, see what I did here? I just get a big swoosh over that, but I also lost the shape with the contrast down here. I want to bring a little bit of that back, and I've decided I'm going to do that by making it lighter. side of the brush, top of the brush, that lilac leaf is just going to be really bright right there. So the ones we've kind of drawn out, those are going to be your light, bright ones. And that's going to be picked up right there. I can even take some of the yellow, yellow itself and put it right up there. I'm going to put it on the top because remember, this is a leaf we're looking at. It's drooping down a little bit. If you put it down here where it's in shade, well, it's not going to pick up the sun up there, and the sun's coming from this direction. So you can really play with that once you know where it's from, where the light is from, and put little blobs of yellow right there. There's tons of ways you can make color that is sunshine color, but for simplicity purposes, it's like, no, it's just yellow today. It's sunshine yellow. And I've got so much on this brush, I'm going to keep on adding it. I like how this leaf fades into the background right there, because we want the lilac to actually poke up more. So I like how that's doing that right there. More blobs, big leaf, and we might come back to that leaf. I want that to have a darker side under here, so I've got more green and purple. That's your go-to to make darker green, just less purple than the blue. Down here, you just add less purple than that. And you're going to go back and forth a little bit, and we're going to give it a bit of a shadow. And mush around with it and play with it. Again, 8x10 is big for something this quick, which is why we're going to do this very impressionistic style and just get some paint on there, and we're going to have fun, because I really want to get to the part where we're doing the lilacs. Like, all of this stuff is almost like it's out of focus. So I'm taking that green and I'm going all the way around, and I'm not trying to cover up the blue, okay? So it's okay for that blue background to poke through. What I don't want to see, like we can cover up some of this right here, I don't want to see a really big patch of blue. We want to break that up. So even going around up here, let's get some white going. I've got a lot of that background blue right here, and learning how much to mix of this is also something that comes with a lot of practice, honestly. If you're mixing paint, a good rule of thumb is to start with at least a quarter size. Like a generous blob of jam on your toast. That, we're talking a lot, like you're hungry. Big blob of toast. I tend to use a lot of cooking metaphors because we're used to sizes and portion sizes when it comes to that kind of texture, even with frosting and jam. So it's a texture and a portion that we're used to. Alright, I'm going to get some light green up here. And if you like that light blue up there and you want to leave it, go for it. You do you. You have fun with that. Now, you notice I'm also doing smaller bits up there because it would be farther away. And I can get some of that background in there again too and get some cool texture. We don't want to spend too much time on this. But if you squint at this whole thing right now, these big triangles are poking out. They're really popping out, as well as these really bright leaves. You don't want anything in the blue back there to pop out, because it's sky. And we'll learn more of that stuff as we go along. Cool. I want to add some nice highlights to my leaves. So it's very impressionistic and it's very much broken color. This is the part where it's very, very hard to leave it alone. So I've got a big blob of color on there. It's white, it's yellow, it's a bunch. And we're going to spread it on here. Kind of high contrast. That's okay. This is very impressionistic, blobby paint going on right here. Now what will happen if you keep blending it, it can get muddy, and you lose that stripe in your paint, and you also lose a lot of time as you go. So there's lots of reasons we're really not going to mess around too much with those paintings back, with those leaves and rendering. We're not interested in rendering today. We want to blob on the lavender bits. Technical term. Alright, I do want to take care of your brush. If you're not going to use your brush for a little bit, definitely rinse it out. It's not as important that you wring it out at that point, although I like to so I don't leave puddles on my desk, surprisingly. And if you wring it out, you can also tell if you've gotten enough paint out of it. If there's still color on your paper towel here, it's either time to change your water or really rinse out your brush some more. And you can tell this one's been tortured a little bit. Alright, so for this pile we're going to be mixing more color. We've got some purple going on. It's really good to mix 3 different colors of purple for this. Now this is your darkest purple right here, and we don't need that anymore. We need a medium purple, a light purple, and of course your dark purple to add back in, and you'll see how that goes. So I also might need to squish out some more purple for myself because I know better. We're going to make the medium purple first, so as much as we're able, this is our shadow. This is going to be our shadow purple, and we'll want one lighter purple as we go around. Remember, the light's coming from this direction, so our lighter purple petals are going to be on this side of the cone. It's going to follow that shape. But first, we need a big old blob of purple. And as you can guess, that yellow is also going to be used in our petals a little bit. So there's the white. I'm going to try to follow my rules here. So I've scooped out some white on this side. I'm going to scoop the purple into the white. I mean, this is a whole little mixing thing right here. Here we go. Mush it all in there. I find this a really bright purple, so you can add even a tad of the yellow, less than that, to this, and that will help dull it down, because purple and yellow are opposites on the color wheel. Alright, will this be enough purple? That's not even a quarter's worth. See, again, I'm not following my own rules. That's not even enough jam for a piece of toast, so I should know better. More white. More white. Should be almost enough jam right there. That is a skimpy piece of toast right there. Add some more of that purple. So this is our light stuff. And we'll leave it alone. I'm starting to scrape up the paper towel too, so that'll be a light purple. That was fine right there. Medium purple. Gonna scrape out some purple and blob it over here a little bit. I'll probably need more purple than that. So a good piece of toast right there. We're not even covering a whole piece of toast when we put this down, but we want something that it's not going to dry immediately right here. I might have enough white that I'm scraping from. This is a nice medium. So you've got the lightest purple right here, you've got the darkest purple blue right there, you want something in the middle. And yours is going to vary a lot as we go back and forth. This one's nice and bright. I really like adding blues to that medium purple, so I'm going to use a tad bit of green, because you saw how blue we got with this other stuff. This green and purple mix go beautifully together into making blues. Alright, I've got a medium purple and a light purple and a big old mess on my palette knife and palette. Naturally. Put that in my water to get some of it off. They can rust a long period of time. And here comes the other fun part, where you could spend way too long doing this. So I'm definitely going to demonstrate on one of these, like do a whole one, because you can spend way too long doing this. Now, I'm going to start with my middle purple right here, and having enough paint is also a big cause of remixing, going back, making sure you have enough to do something. One of the things I found when I paint or taught painting is keeping enough paint at the tip of your brush to make dots. And when you're mixing with your brush, like you probably have been doing this whole time, it gets into the belly of your brush, not the tip of your brush where you need the paint. So you're trying to put it down and it won't. One thing you can do is scrape the brush on the side of your palette like this. You can use your finger if it helps to squeeze that paint out, and then pick it up with the tip of your brush and dop it down. Today we're not going to mess with that. We've got daubers that do spots. So we're cutting out the middleman, we're cutting out constantly scraping your brush to get it on the tip of your brush, and we're going to use these to do dots. Sometimes petals on lilacs are a little elongated. If you do, like, let's try a dot, let's go straight in the middle of this sucker. Try a dot and swipe a little bit, tiny little bit. Oh look, it's a lilac flower. It's a teeny, almost looks like a little butterfly. You could do 4 dots in a row like that. 4 dots, you could do 4 little swipes. See how easy that is? And I've still got so much paint on my little Q-tip right here. So I'm going to do 4 little dots all over. Now, if you want to get fancy with this, you can show how the dots and the lilac bushes aren't facing you completely, so you might only see 3 on one side. You only might see a dot here and there. And that's, you're not missing anything right here. You're giving it much more dimension if you only do 1 or 2 on the edges like that, because it's going to be facing away from you. So because light's coming from over here, honestly, you can go and cover this whole little thing with this medium, because as we go around and adding those lights on top, you can, and we'll do this right here, I'm going to flip this guy over. Even if it gets dry, you can still add more paint with it. But I'm going to flip this little guy over and just go right on top, like right here where there's going to be a highlight. Now, is that going to be too light of a purple? This is where you can troubleshoot. Mix that sucker in there. And once you add more, we can find out if that is going to be too light. But you can go back and forth. Squinting helps a lot. Getting just the right temperature and value of paint is another thing. Dot, 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 dot. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what makes it really fun. Little kids can go 1, 2, 3, 4 the whole time. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back over this spot, 1, 2, 3, 4, and give it some fun dimension. Because then you've got this little glittering pile of petals right there. Now something else that happens when you do these 4s, sometimes 2 of the petals are faced towards the sunlight, and the other 2 have shadow. And this is something I've had some of my advanced students that have then since graduated from me, which is awesome. They try to make these glitter a little bit by adding like which ones are actually going to catch the sunlight and which ones aren't. But in the meantime, if you're ready and just having fun with these 1, 2, 3, 4s, you go for it. Try to give a little smudge. Because it's a little bit longer. And guess what? You can have them go over and actually overlap each other like this. So this is a good sized blob for these giant lilac flowers we've got, which are a little bigger than real size maybe. And you see how that whole cone underneath is practically disappearing underneath these? That's the whole point. It didn't matter what kind of thing you had underneath it. You're fine, especially with acrylic paint and this type of drawing. I am curious on what I'm going to do with this leaf right here. You know what? Let's try going over it, because I don't really like how it turned out. That's the thing. Leaves can cover a multitude of sins of lilacs, and lilacs can go right on top of it again if you don't like what the leaf is doing. So acrylic painting is very forgiving that way. And you see how this medium purple, the medium one we made, is really popping out nicely on top of here. And if you squint, it's disappearing into the background over here. I love it. I love it. You're going to get paint on your hands, probably. This is the non-toxic stuff. I tend to get paint on my hands a lot. I want to use some of the lighter purples right here to add more of that dimension. Now, because this is a cone, the light is hitting part of it. And you'll notice we're not putting the darkest dark on the outside. It's not an outline. This is a three-dimensional object. This is a cone. So that's why the shadow only went on the inside of the cone like that. You can even add some of this lighter stuff, a tiny bit of lighter stuff, to this other side, on the other side where the light would be catching on that other side right there. So we want the majority of the light little petals. And you can elongate that if you want. Q-tips come in handy. You want the majority of your light following the curve of your lilac cone right there. There we go. Smudge. Smudge, smudge, smudge. It's all impressionistic. We're fine. But with having a little bit on this outside cone is also handy to show that it's a three-dimensional object. This is very impressionistic, but having fun with the 1, 2, 3, 4 is also fun. So we've got a light side and a dark side of your Q-tip. If you get them mixed up, it's not the end of the world, it just might surprise you a tiny bit first. Like, that's the wrong one! Alright. I'm liking how that's going. I want this one to be a little darker right there. And I want this cone to be a little wider at the base right here, so I can easily add some dabs right there and just make that happen. It's like you could add all sorts of little petals that start going everywhere. Ta-da! Look at that beautiful thing! So before I go on and just fill in these other ones with whatever time I've got left, what you're also going to do to these little guys is add a little bit of that yellow. And we're going to see what just this straight yellow does first before we add any white to it. Especially in the shadows, you're going to want a little darker yellow. Tiny little bits. Tiny, tiny little bits of that yellow. Whee! Is that even too much? Is it? Did I do it wrong? It's just the fun part. Tiny little stuff. You know what you could also do? This is the fun part of disposable art tools. This happens to be made out of wood. If you have a paper Q-tip or cotton swab, you could cut it with these things, whatever these things are called. Scissors. Even the plastic ones, you suddenly have this little stick that holds things on. So art materials don't have just one use. You can chop this stuff up, especially if you have this disposable stuff, which will help with clean up and all of that, because acrylic is very permanent once it's dry. Very, very permanent. Even on your brushes. That's why if you're switching to something, wash your brush out first. If you're not going to be using it for a little bit, you can even add water to it before you start using it. It kind of helps the bristles a little bit to protect them from absorbing just acrylic in. Oh look, I grabbed purple. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens now. I'm going to scrape it on there. Let's see what happens. It's okay, kids. This is science. We're writing this down on film. That counts. So it's science. Yay! Alright, now that I've broken that Q-tip, let's use the other one over here. I like using the medium, I can't do words, the medium purple first, because then you can go on top of it with highlights, and highlights in this sense would pick up something closest to the surface of this flower, so you almost have little petals on the outside and then they get in the inside. You're probably wondering how I'm going to overlap these little guys right here. Well, I'm totally not counting right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that, I'm going over that line like a charlatan. We had that line there on purpose, darn it. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm keeping some of that under there. 4-ish, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. If enough of these are in 4s, it's gonna make sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Oh, look at that. See? Another technique you could use. Why just do 4 dots if you want smudges? 1, 2, 1, 2. Little X's. 1, 2, 2. 1, 2, especially if you're going to add the other stuff inside of it, or the brighter. Whew, I got a glob on there. It worked too well. 2, 1, 2, 2. You see how these are little glittering things? You can do this with hydrangeas, flowers that have a lot of poof to them. 1, 2. I'll just keep going. So I did the medium purple around there, and in fact, you could even do some darker purple, because what's going to make this pop out as 2 different lilacs whenever you overlap them is contrast. We're going to let this end of the cone of lilacs be full of highlights. And we're going to give them one more farther. Boop. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Swooshes. 2. So if I'm squinting, and squinting is one of the best ways to check your values, quite honestly. If I squint really well, the end of that cone is popping out beautifully with that, and you can enhance it with another dabs here and there. Because as long as you have enough of those little 4 bits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm getting some fuzz on that one from the Q-tip, cotton swab. I don't know, how branded is that? I'll find out after I upload this, right? This is not sponsored by Cotton Swabs. That would be a fascinating sponsorship. It's not sponsored by anything but my love for making art messes. Woohoo! And you've seen how easily that's coming through. So you can break the rules again. I'm going to do the light ones. You could bring in a magenta if you wanted to this, or a red, because lilacs come in so many colors. Like this blue we've still got right here. Using this blue, this light blue, because remember, cones are round and it's picking up some light on the other side. If you use a blue on the other side, let's mix that with this medium stuff. That's almost like saying, hey look, it's in the shadow over here, but it's still picking up the light. It's indirect light on this side, picking up some of that blue. And, well, I mean, blue in general makes cool lilac colors too, quite honestly. But you're having real fun with adding different colors in there, especially around the outside. Can we manage to get it in there? So, depends how much time you have that you can really have fun poking around with colors, adding more reds. I mean, what happens if we add more yellow to this purple? I'm going to swirl it around in here and find out. I'll find out for you. It's a very brown kind of... Honestly, lilac flowers really do go brown when they're kind of spent though, right? So you could have fun and make a realistic, impressionistic if you have a lilac bush that's actually starting to die. You can do some brown stuff this way, or just really glitter that up. Another thing you can do as you continue to get the illusion of a full lilac bush out here is to add some of these smudges out in the green part as well, in the green and blue part. You might want to smudge it with your finger if you want, or you want to get as close to a value as possible with what's already there, so it's not going to stick out, but it will look like it's a nice blooming lilac thing out there. And you hardly even saw that, but it helps make the whole thing go. And it's still lighter right there. Smudge, smudge. These are kind of too thick, doing two little smudges. Now, I'm going to be horrible and whip out another brush real quick to see how this goes. Because lilacs, see, I'm trying to get that to the tip. You see how long that took? See how long it took to do those little guys? And if you wanted to get real fancy, you could do the darker in the middle and poke around with it. You could absolutely do this with a brush. There's the X, the crossing of it, but I don't like the shape of that. You'll actually see little X's that way. You can do a little bit of the darker purple right here, so you could absolutely embellish it with a brush. But you're seeing how the shape right there isn't quite as fun and fast as just dabbing it on with this little guy. Four-ish, that works. Take that. And then some of the light stuff, which you of course can go back into, and there are white lilacs too. You could do a whole one of these in that light purple, and even add more white on top of that to really make it pop out. That would be really good for this one in front, and that would actually help increase the depth of your entire painting, because that would be so much more contrast right in the front right here. It's getting a little muddy on there in my hand. You probably used to start seeing like, oh, she starts with clean hands, and then just as you continue, use gloves. I know there's a way of doing this without getting too messy, but what fun is that? That's why I try to either wash my hands, don't eat your paint, or at least continue like this. So, dab, 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 dab. And you can go over some of this stuff. Because we're using so few colors, especially if you really haven't gotten too much of the yellow in there, you can keep on going over this and it's going to be hard to make it too muddy, as long as you haven't added too much of that yellow. Because as you see, this purple and green, they go together so nicely to even make blue. So it just becomes part of their background if you started mixing it even more. So I'm loving where these things are ending up right here. See what I did? I almost got too close to this spot. I want to make that darker again. Troubleshooting. I want to keep away from this part of the lilac and make this darker. I can make it brighter right here. You could almost think of this lilac in the shadow of this big one back here. Like this one's the farthest one away. See, what am I doing? The opposite of what I just said. So this lilac could be the farthest one away in the back. This one could be the closest to us, and this one could be casting a shadow on this one even. But I need even more purple. Even more purple. And I'm using the same old cotton swab. Get in there. Nice dark bright purple. Bright meaning it's not dull. I didn't add yellow to it. So the yellow could be dark. But it's bright in this sense where it's saturated. Desaturated wouldn't be quite as bright. And kind of mush it together in there. But you see where we're going and what effect we're looking for. If you want something to stand out, give it contrast. Especially if you've got highlights in front of you. You might need more cotton swabs so it doesn't get too muddy and you're having fun with all that. Alright. The last little thing we can do, if you've still got the time for all of this, is probably enhance some of the leaves on the outside. And because we had that giant brush and cotton swabs, you can do this a few ways. Now the first thing I'm going to do is quickly add those extra little... I want it smaller! I want it smaller! You know what? I can do it with smaller with the end of my brush right here, or break one of these, or cut one of these little guys. Because when you look at a lilac, well, like wad, lilac cone, because I mean these are individual lilac flowers. Weird how that is. You don't see that much yellow. It's predominantly purple. So any of this tiny little yellow bits inside of a lilac are usually subordinate to the sheer amount of purple you've got going on here. I like it. I'm not going to use my little brush because we got a big one going here. We have any green left? Maybe. Green and white. You don't need that much green because we're going to be adding little bits of texture to these. Whee! Alright, so I think that brush was too big for this one. Back to the Q-tips. When in doubt, use a smaller thing here for what we're doing. What I'd like to try to do is some highlights. I'm following the shape of the leaf a little bit. Following the shape that would be towards the highlight right there. So I'm leaving that inside vein. And this one, it's kind of turned as well. So I might just add a leaf-shaped smudge. Leaf-shaped smudge right there. Like that. Add a smudge right there because I am perfectly okay with that leaf sticking out. I don't want pure white. That's the thing we're trying to avoid right here. Whatever is pure white is absolutely going to stick out the most. There we go. You see that vein in that flower? Another thing you can do with this particular thing is kind of go around where the veins might be. And that gives another texture to that leaf as well, if you see that. So we're kind of just doing, with enough paint. Smudge, like you're following almost a chevron pattern down that leaf. Smudge, side, side, side. This one could definitely use something like that. Smudge, 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 smudge. It adds another dimension because these flowers are so detailed compared to the rest of it. You want to have something match that in the leaves, or else it might look a little weird to have one thing so quote-unquote detailed and the rest not. So having that extra little texture, I really like that, and I'd like to add it to this one if I can. If it's not too late. Take that. That works. That's easy. We'll pretend that's a big old leaf. It's kind of pointing out. And you know what? I can use the opposite end of that to bring paint back out. So they're leaves. They're leaves having fun. Whee! Like that. I'm liking how it's working. It's a nice beginner set of lilacs. You've got a cone-shaped flower. You've got those green leaves going off into the background. I'm kind of drawing an oval right here. You've drawn parentheses when you write, right? Those little comma things. If you can do a parenthesis, you can do this. It's a curve. They go forwards and backwards, but right here they need to hug. You've done this before plenty of times when you write. You've done tons of shapes when you write. Your hand is just trained to do them in a very small location. And so when you do it with each arm, it feels differently. Thank you. That's my whole spiel. I'm going to smudge that in there so I don't see it too much. I would like to bring a leaf back here because you see how that leaf kind of avoids that edge. That leaf is doing it too. It's avoiding the lilac, and that's something subconscious is going to stick out to your brain. Like, you know you did it on purpose. It's too obvious. And so that's little compositional things that you can go back in. And you know, since that's a nice bright leaf right there, that will really help your lilac push forward too, depending on how you're doing that. So there's lots of ways, increasing contrast and going back and forth. Alright, I'm going to see what this looks like through the camera lens up top, because I think that is a gorgeous painting of lilacs that we've basically done in under an hour. If you can keep up with that fun color mixing stuff. Might take you a little bit longer to pause, of course, and go over your color mixing as you get used to that, or if you're not. So this was fun! Thank you for joining me. I'm going to try to make this a smaller set. So when I go out to do events and farmers markets, I would love to have this in a little kit where you've got all the colors you need, you have your brush and your Q-tips, you've got your pots of paint all mixed up, and you do a smaller version of it. So this is actually a nice postcard size that you could technically send through the mail, but a nice little tiny crafty thing to go. But here's how you do a big one. Thank you so much for following along with me, and I hope you had fun.